She arrived at his ranch, desperate and trembling, whispering, "Please, just make it fast." The towering Apache girl wasn't asking for mercy. She was asking for survival, for trust, for a chance to escape her past. The virgin rancher stood still, unsure what to do, until he made a choice that would change both their lives forever. Let's get started. The sun hung low over the rugged plains, casting long shadows across the ranch. The Apache girl stumbled through the tall grass, her breathing heavy and uneven. Dust clung to her clothes, her skin streaked with sweat and grit. She reached the ranch gates, trembling with exhaustion and desperation. The rancher stood silently, leaning against the wooden fence, his eyes wary yet curious. She raised her hand slightly, her voice cracking as she spoke. "Please, just make it fast," she said, her tone both pleading and challenging. He didn't move at first, trying to understand her urgency. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, tall, strong, and unyielding, yet her vulnerability shone through her words. He stepped closer cautiously, examining the raw determination in her gaze. Every movement suggested she had been through countless hardships. The wind rustled the nearby trees, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and distant rain. Despite the fear knotting his stomach, he sensed a story behind her plea, one that demanded more than instinct or haste. He opened his mouth to ask a question, but found the words caught in his throat. Sometimes silence spoke louder than conversation. Her eyes darted nervously as she waited, glancing around the ranch as if hoping for help or escape. The virgin rancher studied her posture, noting the slight tremor in her hands and the tension in her shoulders. Something had driven her to this moment, something beyond ordinary survival. She wasn't just seeking aid. She was seeking release, resolution, perhaps even trust. The vast expanse of the frontier seemed to shrink around them, leaving only the two of them in the fading light. He realized that hesitation now might mean losing her entirely, yet he remained rooted in careful observation. Finally he spoke, his voice low but steady. "What is it you want me to do?" She looked down at the dirt, ashamed and hesitant yet desperate. "I need freedom," she murmured. "Freedom from the men who hunt me, freedom from fear, freedom from my past." The weight of her words sank into him. This was no simple favor. It was a plea for safety, a life-saving trust. He swallowed hard and extended his hand slowly. "Then we'll do it together," he said, a promise in his tone. Her relief was immediate, almost tangible. Over the next days, the Apache girl stayed at the ranch, cautious but curious. She helped with chores, her strength unmatched, lifting hay bales and mending fences with ease. Despite her formidable presence, there was softness in her smile when he handed her a glass of water or shared a quiet meal. The rancher, in turn, learned her story in fragments, piecing together the dangers she had fled, the people she had lost, and the relentless pursuit that had driven her to his doorstep. Trust was fragile, but slowly it began to grow. Evenings became a time for conversation and quiet reflection. They sat by the fire, listening to the crackle of flames, sharing tales of the land and life. She spoke of her tribe, of traditions and family, of the wilderness she once called home. He spoke of his ranch, of cattle drives and lonely nights, of the simple joys that came with a life close to the earth. Each story built a bridge between them, weaving empathy and understanding. In the glow of firelight, their connection deepened, fragile but undeniable. One night, distant sounds shattered the quiet. Horses thundered, voices shouted, and shadows moved along the horizon. A gang of outlaws had discovered their location, threatening the safety of the ranch and the girl he had come to protect. The Apache girl's eyes sharpened, her body tensed. She moved with precision and speed, her knowledge of tracking and survival clear. The rancher watched in awe as she prepared to confront them, realizing that her plea for fast action was about more than fear. It was about survival, strategy, and courage. The confrontation was swift and brutal. She fought with skill and ferocity, using every advantage the land provided. The rancher joined her, holding his ground and defending both the property and her safety. In the chaos, they communicated without words, instinctively moving as a single unit. Their trust became action, their bond forged in the fire of danger. By the time the outlaws retreated, bruised and beaten, the ranch was safe and the girl stood tall, her breathing steady but fierce. Victory had been earned not through violence alone, but through courage and partnership. After the battle, the rancher tended to her wounds, careful and gentle, despite his own exhaustion. She allowed herself to relax, leaning against him briefly, a silent acknowledgement of reliance and trust. The frontier was unforgiving, yet together they had turned vulnerability into strength. She whispered her gratitude, and he offered reassurance, not as a savior but as an equal. This mutual respect and understanding marked a new chapter, one where fear no longer dictated her actions, where trust and connection offered a lifeline she had never experienced before. As weeks passed, the Apache girl became an integral part of the ranch, her presence both commanding and comforting. Neighbors who once questioned her motives came to respect her skill and courage. The rancher, once isolated, discovered the joy of partnership and companionship. Together, they faced the daily challenges of frontier life, harsh weather, wild animals, and the constant work of survival. Through these trials, their bond grew, rooted in mutual respect, admiration, and unspoken affection. Life on the ranch was no longer a solitary endeavor, but a shared journey. Evenings by the fire grew longer, filled with conversation, laughter, and quiet reflection. They spoke of dreams and fears, of hopes for the future and memories of the past. In her presence, the rancher learned patience and humility. In his steadiness, the Apache girl found safety and acceptance. Their relationship evolved naturally, built on trust rather than necessity, on choice rather than obligation. In a land defined by danger and isolation, they had discovered something rare, a partnership that encompassed strength, compassion, and the possibility of love. The girl taught him lessons of the land, of tracking and survival, while he shared skills of ranching, planning, and perseverance. Their lives became intertwined, each day reinforcing the bond that had begun with a desperate plea. She no longer feared the past. He no longer feared loneliness. Together, they faced the unknown with courage, finding joy in small victories and comfort in shared silence. The harsh frontier, once a place of isolation and fear, transformed into a home filled with trust and companionship. Months passed and the seasons changed, painting the plains with new colors. The Apache girl and the rancher worked side by side, their relationship growing deeper and steadier with each day. She laughed freely now, unburdened by fear, and he embraced a life richer than he had imagined. They faced hardships together, celebrated small triumphs, and leaned on each other through uncertainty. Their story was not defined by a single moment of desperation, but by the continuous choice to trust, to care, and to stand together in a world that demanded strength. The ranch became a symbol of resilience, survival, and partnership. Visitors would marvel at the pair, her strength and presence, his calm authority, and the unspoken connection that radiated between them. They had turned a chance encounter into a life-altering partnership. Their bond, forged in desperation and solidified through shared struggle, became legendary in the valley. And in the quiet moments, they both knew that the frontier had tested them, challenged them, and ultimately gifted them something far more valuable than land or cattle, a companion, a protector, and a trusted partner. At night, under a sky strewn with stars, they would sit together, listening to the wind rustle the prairie grass. Words were often unnecessary. Trust, understanding, and affection spoke for them. The Apache girl, once desperate and fleeing, had found refuge, safety, and belonging. The rancher, once alone and cautious, had found connection, purpose, and companionship. Their journey, beginning with a simple plea, "Please, just make it fast," had evolved into a life intertwined, complete, and enduring. In the endless expanse of the Wild West, they had discovered not just survival, but the rare gift of partnership and love.
Apache girl pleads for help. Rancher must act. changing both their lives.